Thanks very much. That is a really interesting couple of acts to follow this morning on the topic of early careers and its shift in AI. So we have a brilliant group with us this morning who are all at that early career stage. They've just started in data science and software engineering and have been through learning the fundamentals of their craft and working out, well, how do I do that with this fundamental change that's going on? So we're going to kick off with a focus on how have each of you come through your journey so far? What did it look like to learn the fundamentals? And how did AI fit into that? It'd be great to start with you.
Yeah.
And with that, obviously, give us a wee intro to yourself and your background.
So my name is Deirbhile, and I currently work at Allstate. So I actually only graduated in July, but I've been working at Allstate this last 3 years. So the reason that I got into AI was it wasn't anything we learned in uni or anything like that. It was just a personal interest of mine, and for my final year project, I built an AI application. So that was all kind of self-driven learning, kind of all the different kinds of AI and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into AI.
Jessica.
Yeah, I'm Jessica, and I'm a data scientist at Aflac, Northern Ireland. And I learned how to code, or the fundamentals of coding, before AI was widely available. So I suppose I approached learning the fundamentals in the same way that most people who learned without AI did, by spending hours on Stack Overflow and reading documentation. And everything took longer, of course, but that forced you to really understand what was going on under the hood. I think people that learn using AI from the start can move incredibly quickly and build impressive things very early on. And AI helps people who do know the fundamentals as well, but I think there's a limit, especially with complex code bases, and that AI can get you a certain percentage of the way there, but when something breaks, it helps to have the fundamentals so that you can debug and fix it yourself.
Yeah, hello, I'm Niall. I'm a software engineer at Instil and have been there for just under 4 years. I've been doing an apprenticeship through Ulster University. So I've been working for Instil for about 4 years, and then was coding before that. So yeah, I similarly would have learned the basics before then, but since then I've moved into our AI and data team within Instil, where we work on kind of a range of different clients, helping them bring AI and implement AI into their specific industry. So, for example, I'm working in the legal sector at the moment. So yeah, since then I've really adopted AI and AI-driven development for most of what I do, especially when you're working with, for example, coming from an AWS background, maybe into an Azure or like a new something you're not used to doing, a new code base and new programming language. It's so helpful, but yeah, difficult if you're learning the basics from the start.
Hello, my name is Caitlin. I'm a software engineer with Liberty IT, and I'm sort of like a hybrid in between. I started off learning the foundations at university, and I did my internship with Liberty IT, where we weren't using AI. It wasn't really a thing back then. So I learned the fundamentals, had the mentorship, learned from senior engineers, best practices, etc. And then once I came back, AI became quite big, and we sort of learned how to adopt that and work with it. My thing is, you should use AI as an accelerant, not a substitute. Yep.
It would be great, Caitlin, to understand, with that change you've been through, so you started without AI and then have gradually learned it, what do you think are the biggest risks to the skills? What do you think we really need to hold on to from what you've learnt as we run more academies, bring more people through?
Yeah, so what I've seen is there's been research that suggests that there's a negative impact on your critical thinking and problem solving skills if you are using AI as a substitute. For example, if you're just getting it to do everything and you don't truly understand what the problem is, then you end up in long debugging cycles, for example, and it's just a whole pile of mess to try sort out. In terms of that, I've noticed that there are people who, you ask them, okay, can you solve this problem? They go to the AI, and the AI doesn't fully understand it because they don't understand it. And that's sort of hinging on what Dave was talking about, and Sean as well.
Brilliant. Deirbhile, what's your experience whenever you look at the skills that you built originally and what you think is really important to hold on to? what are the key learnings you take with and say, we really need to keep doing that, and we definitely want to be a bit careful about losing some of those skills?
Yeah, like the others, like I'm kind of grateful that I came into the sector before AI was like really popularized to kind of get the basic understanding. Like it's well and good that AI can generate all this code, but we need to understand what it's actually doing. And I think without that experience of actually coding without AI, we don't know. Like even for like reviewing AI code without the basic understanding for a junior dev, you can't do that. You have to have the understanding. So that's kind of where I think like you have to kind of take that own responsibility in yourself to kind of, I'm not going to use AI for this. You have to kind of use it more like a mentor rather than just get it in to do all your code.
There's a real challenge there between becoming dependent on it and using it to go faster and be more productive, and whether that's in how you use your Excel spreadsheets and your Copilots with it, or how you're cutting the code, or how you're refining your user stories. How have you found getting that balance, and have you been able to notice when actually it's starting to take over and take the lead versus you making the active decisions?
Yeah, I think it is finding the balance that is the issue. A lot of people can rely heavily on it, but I think what you have to remind yourself, if it ever went down or wasn't available, would you still be able to do that work yourself? Would you still be able to understand everything? Even like if you're put your code into AI and it fixes the issue, another issue could come down a few months down the line and you're like, I don't know what that does. So I think you have to have a really good understanding. Even if you do get it to write your code, that's fine, but you have to understand everything that it's writing, and you have to make sure that you have a really good understanding. It's great for like syntax and stuff, and like I think they were saying earlier, like even if you're writing in a different language. So for example, I primarily write in Java, but there has been times where I've had to write in Python, and I might not have a great understanding of the syntax, but because I have a good understanding of the coding, I can then go to AI and still understand what they're giving me. So yeah, I think that's important.
Has anyone else got any hints or tips you'd like to share on what you're doing to get that balance of trusting the AI versus going faster with it?
Yeah, I would say like most of what I'm doing I would really describe as pairing with AI. Like when you're working on a problem, it's similar to if I was pairing with another human, where you're working through a solution, and if it generates code that you don't understand or takes an approach that you don't understand, you challenge the AI and ask it why it done that. What's a different approach you might take, even suggesting a different approach. And I think, yeah, it's important that you understand, obviously, the output. And if you're using the likes of Claude Code or GitHub Copilot in the CLI, you have the ability for it to run CLI commands and stuff as well. And it's really important in that situation that you, again, know what it's doing, you verify those, and there's protection and an environment that's set up where agents can thrive. I think it's really important.
With what you heard in the previous talks to this, the idea of not reviewing your code and trusting the AI to commit, and you understand and check the scenario of the output, how nervous does that make you feel?
I still think it's a bit scary, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
While AI is great, I do think you need a bit of human interaction in there.
Too much just yet. Niall, we had talked before about the impact on education, and it's not quite where it's not keeping up and where it's doing well. What's your view on what are educators doing well? What do we need to be changing about this environment?
Yeah, I think it's challenging, even like we were saying about for junior engineers joining companies. It's challenging because if we think about how we teach fundamentals, it ultimately is writing code yourself. But if the industry is changing that we're not doing that, it doesn't make a lot of sense that we still teach fundamentals in that way. I don't know what the new way of teaching those fundamentals looks like. And I get from an education point of view, assessment, etc., means that you kind of have to stay with the traditional approaches to assessment. But I think it nearly makes that jump from when a junior leaves university to joining a company. It makes that even harder because they're worlds apart in like the way things are done and the way that we teach fundamentals versus how we actually implement code is and build software in applications is very different because things are more AI driven now, whereas university doesn't really have that environment. It's because the education model or at any stage in education doesn't fit well to that. So I think we just need to figure out what the new normal looks like there.
Do you think that's more about, do you teach the modules in a different way, or do you think it's the subject focus needs to change, or the way it's assessed?
Well, I think
Or
as we said, like it's a way of building software is a way of thinking, in that you need to think how to make a problem modular, as we were talking about this morning, and things like that. And I think those things are still important. It's just how we teach them, I think, has to change, because traditional assessment, as we said, people can leave university, and because they have cheated their way through, maybe don't understand the fundamentals, and therefore, it sort of was in some ways then has less value.
Yeah. Are there any practical changes across the group that you think of that might help? If you were talking to the Ulster or Queen's University today and they're reshaping their courses for the future, are there any things you would say, really would love to see this change, that they could take away?
For me personally, I think we should just go back to our roots of having exam-based assessments and really teaching students how to build systems and not just about the code. Because if they truly understand how the system is working, then that is half the battle. I think we should do that, because I have seen that we have adopted a thing where we're like, right, you have an assignment, you have to create, say, an application that runs on Docker, for example, microservices, and you're like, right, you can use ChatGPT freely as long as you reference it. I think that is quite dangerous to do, because then you go back to the student and you go, well, how does this work? And they're like, well, ChatGPT wrote it. I actually don't know. There could be security risks with that as well. So it's quite an interesting time that we're in at the minute, and it's quite an interesting problem to actually think about. How do we preserve those skills, our critical thinking and problem solving skills, as our jobs are changing in a way?
Yeah, it's a really interesting subject. That the level of suggestions and impact that AI makes on the software system as a whole is high now, and it's growing. And what do you think the impact is of that on security, compliance, and particularly that critical thinking? How do you think we adjust for that?
I love security, so I apologize. Yeah, so AI and security, we've all seen that you have given, for example, an agent full production access. You have told it, right, here's the rules, you're not allowed to run any dangerous commands. There have been instances where it has been like, right, I'll run this command, delete the entire production database. And then you're like, well, I didn't expect that to happen. It's because you are blindly trusting AI. You are saying, I want you to do this, but although you've set those rules in place, you don't actually have sufficient guardrails. You don't have permissions, for example. You're not like isolating it from your environments. I also think that in terms of security as well, you need to adopt training. You need to train your engineers on how can they actually use AI, what can they do and what can't they do with it, from a GDPR perspective. Especially, for example, if you're feeding a confidential information, you don't want to do that. That is really dangerous. So things like that. So formal training, don't blindly trust AI, and implementing guardrails.
Just to pick up on that point, come to you in a second, Niall. On the guardrails side of things, how do you implement guardrails? What does good look like for you, and how did you learn to do that well? There's a whole new terminology that's been brought into the world of software engineering over the last few years. Yeah. What does good look like?
So I'm with Liberty IT, and as an organisation, we'll want to have guardrails around anything we're doing. We want to keep our data secure and within our environments. So from an organisational perspective, obviously you want to have least privilege. You don't want the model to have access to your production environments. You want to make sure that there's always someone there to review your code, and you're not just letting AI go wild on the CI/CD pipelines and just deploying whatever it wants, whenever it wants. I think that is a really, really important strategy that you need to develop to ensure that you don't end up with incidents where you have leaked confidential information and you have brought down the entire production database because you trusted the AI. I think some organisations are quite good at this, but some still need to learn that.
I think it's really interesting that you're at this stage of your career, you're having to work out that whole breadth of guardrails. Guardrails isn't just one thing. It's not one set of security permissions. It's every aspect of your delivery pipeline, which is super. Niall?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I said something earlier on where I said it's about giving an agent a good environment to work in. And I think if we don't have permissions set in place, it shouldn't be down to the individual developer to make sure that when they're in the CLI, while obviously I said you should be reviewing commands that it runs, it shouldn't be up to the developer to make sure that it's not doing something that it isn't intended to do. So a few days ago, this is related to AWS MCP, but they released the ability to set like read-only permissions that an MCP can only ever have read-only permissions, meaning that, for example, as a developer, I might still have permission if I needed to go in and like stop an EC2 instance or figure out why an IAM rule's not working. But an MCP will only ever have read-only access to that, and I think that's really important because it's been a few situations where I've saw where people have made changes within made changes to their environment that maybe they were testing in, and they're not in infrastructure as code, and then as a result you have kind of like environment drift as you go through and that. I think it's important to make sure that there's guardrails set up as an organization to make sure that agents can't do things that you don't intend them to.
Yeah. Yes, it's beyond you as a developer, just setting your controls, the whole you need those guardrails for you and as a team to be set up for you or with you. Brilliant. And, Jessica, from moving on from that to maybe more responsible AI side of things, how do you responsibly implement AI? How do you see that practically work in your day-to-day whenever you're developing user stories or creating solutions? How do you take all of that security and risk and bias that exists out there and make sure what you're delivering is going to be good quality?
I think a lot of companies are still in the process of defining what responsible AI use looks like, and the technologies move faster than the policy, so we're still figuring it out as we go. One big thing is being careful with sensitive data, so we wouldn't paste customer data or proprietary code into public AI tools. If I want help with something that involves our actual data, I'll either anonymize it or use tools that have proper data handling guarantees. So tools where your data isn't used for training, and there are clear contractual protections in place. And beyond that, I don't think that we should blindly trust code that's been generated by AI. So I always review the code before using it. And I think that we should be comfortable explaining or defending a piece of code in a review, or if something breaks, particularly if it's going into production, because at the end of the day, we're responsible for the code that goes into production and not AI.
Really key word in there, that responsibility. So whenever you write code and you put it into production, you feel that responsibility of it needs to work. What do you think cemented that? Like, why do you feel responsible?
AI can't be held responsible, I suppose, for code, and someone has to be held responsible for it.
Yeah.
So I think if you're generating it using AI, then you should be responsible for it.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I guess, other dynamic that we have now. Whenever you're looking at that training and learning of, actually, it's a deliberate decision to take full responsibility for not just what you write, but what the AI writes on your behalf. Are there any other thoughts across the group on responsible AI and what you're doing about it, what you think is important?
I think it just comes back to, as what I said about don't blindly trust AI.
Yeah.
You're responsible for the code it produces, and you need to know that you are responsible for that and the repercussions of that.
Okay. We're going to run short on time, so maybe one last question that I'd love to ask all of you, with two questions. What excites you most about the changes in this ecosystem? And if you had one recommendation for your senior leaders, what would it be? Deirbhile, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I think one thing I'm excited for is, like, it opens so many doors. Like, I think with AI, it could just, the possibilities of what we can do with it is endless. While we do have to be responsible, I think it's such an amazing tool that can just do anything. Maybe one thing to put in your leaders is maybe contradicting what I'm saying, but don't rely on it too heavily. We do also have to keep those skills ourselves, making sure that you can use it and you still also keep those skills that any programmer or anyone in the industry should have.
I think I'm most excited to see what the next generation of models will be capable of, because they're already seeing AI do things that seemed impossible a few years ago, and the amount of progress that's been made is incredible. As for what technical leaders can do, I think that they should make sure that they're giving early career technologists the time to understand the code that's being generated, because there could be pressure to deliver more quickly, and AI does make that possible. But if we're not careful, then we'll end up with junior developers who don't understand what it's doing and why. So I think managers could help by building in time for that, and maybe encourage code reviews where people explain the generated code and why they chose to use it.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been able to solve what was previously unsolvable problems. Like I mentioned, that I'm working in our data and AI team, and it's so much that we see people come in with problems that they have in their organization that previously you would never have dreamt of being able to solve them, either because they're algorithmically complex or because they need sort of intelligence to solve them at the time, which obviously we can now automate. And I think, from senior organizations, I think there's no doubt about it that our ways of working are going to become agentic, and that's the way things are going. So I think it's really important that those who are maybe further on in that journey than those just entering create an environment that those agents can work well, whether or not that's defining what a project should and shouldn't look like within the code base and instructions file, or just sharing ways of working and things that they're doing that are working with other members of their team. So if something works for them, whether that's defining a skill within your code base or just recording a video to share with the rest of the team so that they can then pick up on that and practice that as well. I think it's really important.
Finally, Caitlin.
I think what excites me is, as everybody has said here, like the possibilities are endless. There's new ways of working, new workflows coming up, and we're able to actually focus on not being lost in the boilerplate, but being able to focus on complex problems and actually delivering transformative solutions. From a perspective of leaders, I think that it is important that we have the training in place to train junior engineers who haven't really gone through what we went through in terms of learning the fundamentals without AI is quite important, and the way that Sean was mentioning how Kainos was leveraging that is quite interesting.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Just before we let you go off the stage, I just want to highlight the breadth of topics that you're all talking about today is phenomenal. If you think back to 2, 3, 4 years ago, if you talk to somebody in that early stage of their career, they're very often thinking about, how do I understand this language properly? How do I get this working? How do I debug effectively? The range of topics that you're talking about here and that you've got an understanding of are just incredible. And the excitement of what's coming next is fantastic, and equally balanced with we need to create the environment as leaders for change, and to be considerate, to create the time to learn, to get the fundamentals right, but to also be ambitious and to set the guardrails that allow for that exploration and that change. So really great insights. Thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate it.